The murder of the Russian royal family. The fate of the Princess Anastasia. It is one of the greatest unsolved puzzles of the 20th century.
We know that 2 of the Grand Duchesses left that room alive.
Now, a new discovery could bring the mystery to an end. Scientists have uncovered a grave, but are these bones real? With exclusive access, National Geographic goes inside the investigation. From the science to the secret Soviet archives, no piece of evidence is left unturned to uncover the final answer. What really happened to Anastasia?
It's really vast out here, so desolate, so far away from civilization. But that's where 2 bodies are supposed to be.
Dr. Anthony Falsetti is one of the world's leading forensic anthropologists, a veteran of the 9/11 investigation. The Russian government has called him in as part of a team of experts to investigate a 90-year-old crime scene. On this case, there is no room for error. The newly unearthed bodies may belong to long-lost members of the nation's royal family. But no one knows for sure what has really been found. The stakes are high, and the truth of what happened to the Romanovs has long been obscured. History blended with myth and legend. But this investigation could put to rest questions that have kept the world guessing for nearly a century. Did the royal line of Russia end in a violent murder? Or did an heir to the throne escape and live? Falsetti is joined by Dr. Michael Coble, one of the leading forensic DNA experts in the world. He works for the Pentagon, identifying the remains of American soldiers. With the U.S. military's laboratories at his full disposal, he will attempt to put names to these mystery bones. The team is headed into a remote forest, 12 miles outside the Siberian city of Yekaterinburg. This far-flung industrial outpost is where the fate of Russia's royal family was written. Harsh and unforgiving, Siberia has long been a land of exile, of unanswered questions, where people, political undesirables, prisoners of war, disappeared. And for the Romanovs, it would be no different. Five children, born into royal lives. The Grand Duchesses, Olga and Tatiana, the flower of young womanhood. Maria and Anastasia are beguiling teenagers. 13-year-old Crown Prince Alexis is the boy born to be king. Millions of loyal Russians revere them, even worship them. A divine family set on earth to rule the nation. But the line will end with them. 1917, the Russian Revolution. In its wake, a civil war rages. Bolsheviks against Tsarist loyalists. The royal family imprisoned, exiled to Siberia, under house arrest in Yekaterinburg. Moscow and the heart of the fledgling Soviet state are 900 miles away. The family are on its unstable fringes. Much of the country is still divided in civil war. In July 1918, the Yekaterinburg Reds feared that a Czech army and White Russian forces were on their way to rescue the Tsar. The decision was made to act. Yakov Yurovsky was the hardliner chosen by the local committee to take over command of the House of Exile. The guards, known to have become affectionate towards the family, were removed. Yurovsky brought in new men with a new mission: to execute the prisoners. In the cellar of this house, in 20 horrific minutes, on the night of July 17th, 1918, the last chapter of the Romanovs would be written. Just after midnight, the royals are roused from sleep by guards. The family is told that because of anarchist unrest in the town, the upper rooms of the house have become unsafe, that there may be shooting in the streets. The Tsar, his wife, and 5 children, along with their 4 attendants, all 11 that make up the royal household, are brought down into the cellar for their own safety. Yurovsky and his men enter the room. He has instructed each to shoot a different family member in the heart to lessen the blood flow. There were investigations after the event, and there are written accounts as detailed as they are confusing. But what happened here was both savage and hate-filled. As the smoke cleared, the myth began. Could anyone really have escaped this carnage? The bones now found in the Koptyaki forest may provide the answers to this question. Shedding fact from fiction in a case that has sparked the popular imagination has proven virtually impossible. But this latest find may give investigators the evidence they've been searching for decades. The final answer, hidden in the snowy Siberian forest for nearly 90 years. From here, Falsetti and the team must carry on foot.
When I arrive at a crime scene, what I hope to find are the facts. Who found it, when they found it, where they found it, and under what conditions.
They have come to meet the men who made the find.
Hello, здравствуйте. Добрый день. Здравствуйте.
So,
Ну,
what did you find?
что вы
Where did
нашли?
you find it?
Останки 2 православных святых примерно вот в этом месте.
How deep was the burial?
The remains have been moved to a morgue for safekeeping.
What else did you find with it? Any artifacts?
Вы нашли кости или что-то
Мы
другое?
нашли здесь большую перемешку с углями. Вот.
What I'm hearing from these archaeologists is they have bones, maybe some projectiles. What we don't have is any evidence of a really controlled excavation, and it's quite frankly making me nervous.
All Falsetti has here is a location, but there is no evidence left at the crime scene, and the documentation of the find is scant. The case of the Romanovs is no stranger to hoaxes and cover-ups, and this latest find may be no different. In the days after the killing, newspapers report that only the Tsar has been killed. For 8 years, the Soviet state claims that the rest of the royal family are alive and well. But the cover-up fails, and the Russian government changes its story. All 11 members of the royal household executed. But there are reported sightings of Alexei, of Anastasia. Are the children alive or dead? The whispered rumors refuse to die. In Moscow, there is unease about the precise fate of the Romanovs. An imposter claiming to be Alexei is officially investigated. Years pass. Under Stalin, it is forbidden to even mention the family. 1991. The Soviet Union collapses. local academics go into the Koptyaki forest and dig. Yurovsky by now is long dead, but in papers left to his son, there are clues as to where the 11 bodies of the royal household might lie. As they dig, a shallow grave comes to the surface. Skulls, bones, full skeletons. But something is wrong.
In 1991, 9 sets of remains were found. There were 11 people that were killed in Yekaterinburg that night. 2 sets of remains were still missing.
The Tsar and the Tsarina, 3 of their daughters, and 4 attendants are identified. But 2 of the youngest royal children aren't among the dead. Now 70 yards from the first grave, this second find. The proximity suggests a potential connection, but nothing more. For decades, conspiracy theorists have suggested that this forest may be littered with the bodies of other nameless dead. Proving that these remains are truly the Romanov children will not be easy. Now in storage in Yekaterinburg City Morgue, the newly uncovered bones are about to undergo the most intense scrutiny 21st century forensic science can muster. Did the Russian royal family come to a violent end at the hands of Bolshevik executioners? Or could the legends be true? Did 2 of Tsar Nicholas's children survive? Forensic anthropologist Anthony Falsetti and DNA expert Michael Kobel are about to get their first look at the bones that may solve this case. Under lock and key in Yekaterinburg morgue, access to these potentially royal remains is tightly controlled. In 2000, the Russian Orthodox Church canonized the Romanovs as martyrs. And these bones, if authenticated, could become holy relics. Falsetti is no stranger to these halls. He was part of the original team assembled in the 1990s to investigate the first set of Romanov bones. Investigations that were contentious. The findings were controversial and disputed in full view of the press. Russian scientists used facial reconstruction techniques to claim that one of the bodies was that of Anastasia, but others were unconvinced. Still more troubling, the body count discrepancy.
2 bodies are still missing.
Was this the true grave if 2 bodies were missing? Accusations of political influence in the rush to identification polluted the air. In the end, the Russian Orthodox Church rejected DNA evidence as tainted and refused to acknowledge that the uncovered remains were in fact the Romanovs. But now, this new find could change all that. And this time, the team is eager to avoid the media circus of 1991. But the Romanov mystery is once again big news.
We arrive into the lab, and there's a massive number of cameras and people doing interviews while we're trying to look at the remains.
It's a media circus. I don't think these people have any understanding of contamination, the potential for breakage of these samples, and just losing them under all of this chaos.
Are the conditions good enough for you?
If these are the Romanovs, they were used to being photographed, but I'm not sure why they're willing to compromise the forensic science. That's worrisome.
The start of the investigation will make the evening news. But once the media leave, it becomes clear that there is a real problem.
Once the cameras are gone, we get down to work. And what I discover is that these 44 fragments, many we're not going to be able to identify as being human. Perhaps they're not. There's just not enough material here.
These shattered remains look nothing like the nearly intact skeletons found in 1991. Broken, almost unrecognizable. But careful inspection by expert eyes reveals that the fragmentary remains are human.
Two people.
But who are they the remains of? Are these the bones of Alexei, Maria, or Anastasia? Or someone else entirely?
The mystery within the mystery is what happened to Anastasia. Did she escape? Or is she here? Right now, I can't tell whether I have two females or a male and a female, or whether these fragments are part of the other bones that were already recovered.
Touching and photographing what may be the bones of saints is a delicate matter. Each fragment must be handled with the greatest respect and sensitivity. Falsetti has now had time to examine every piece and has made a breakthrough.
It doesn't look like much. It is a portion of the pelvis. It is our os cox. And as it turns out, it is from a female. We can deduce that by the sciatic notch. In males, it would be more narrow. In females, it is quite wide. That is critical. We know we have two people. Now we know that one of them is a female.
A male and a female. Body parts from two individuals. But are they the missing Romanov children? Falsetti and the forensic anthropologists will have to dig deeper. For Mike Coble and the DNA team, there is another problem. These bones show evidence of burning.
Looking at the remains, I'm beginning to think this is going to be a very difficult case. When the bone is burned, there's a lot of heat generated, which is not very good for DNA.
Take our sample from down here, 2.5, 3 centimeter cut.
Coble has selected the bones most likely to yield readable DNA. Minute pieces will be cut off and sent to his lab in America and to others around the world for independent analysis.
These are the fragments that we think would have the highest degree of success.
But teasing out the 90-year-old genes that may lie dormant in the fragments will take weeks. And the chances that the DNA has survived intact are slim. Coble heads back to the U.S. to await the arrival of the bones. But Falsetti stays behind to look for other clues that could solve the case if the DNA work is inconclusive. A few pieces of badly damaged bone offer the forensics expert little to go on. But in the town where the Romanov family met their end, there are more leads to follow up. Local archaeologist Sergei Pogorelov was one of the diggers who found the bones in 2007. This is the missing evidence taken from the grave in the forest. Among the artifacts recovered are fragments of a wooden crate, quantities of ash, and some pieces of pottery. Each is a clue to what might have happened. The ash corroborates the burn marks on the bones. A picture is beginning to form.
What kind of container do you think?
The pottery shards are perhaps the most compelling, as similar shards were found in the 1991 grave.
These are the ones from 1991?
It is the first suggestion of a link between the grave sites. But this is far from conclusive. Tying this evidence into a narrative of what happened at the scene 90 years earlier will force Falsetti to look elsewhere. But the answer to the lost bones' identity and to what really happened to Anastasia and the rest of the Romanov children may be inside this box. These are the samples Dr. Michael Kobel selected back at the Yekaterinburg morgue. They've made the 5,400-mile journey to the United States, sealed in contamination-proof containers. Other samples are on their way to Austria and other labs around the world. The package is brought into a clean room. At every turn, procedure is followed to ensure that the integrity of the samples remains uncompromised. Inside, tiny samples, a few grams each. Are these the remains of Alexei, Maria, or Anastasia? Putting names to these newly discovered bones will hinge on whether or not DNA from these samples can be traced back through the generations to genetic markers shared by a very select group of people, the intermarried households of European royalty. The Romanov children, like the modern royal family of England, descend from Queen Victoria, and the DNA in this royal bloodline bears unique identifying genetic characteristics. Kobel and his team are used to dealing with the remains of modern warriors, but these bones are nearly a century old. Teasing DNA out of these fragments will not be easy. DNA is fragile, easily damaged by the ravages of time. They've endured almost a century below ground in one of the most challenging climates in the world, minus 40 degrees in winter and above 100 Fahrenheit in summer. Finding an intact sequence for identification will mean destroying the bone almost completely. This is all that is left, precious little. If this test is inconclusive, Kobel might not have enough to run a second test, and the bodies may never be identified. An international effort is underway to solve the 90-year-old murder of the Romanovs. In Russia, Anthony Falsetti has a lead that may help him piece together the incohesive shreds of evidence recovered from the crime scene. Testimony from a witness, long dead. The Moscow State Archive. As an investigator working with the Kremlin, he's been given high-level clearance.
Here I am, an American scientist, 2 floors below ground, 100 years worth of communist secrets.
The keeper of those secrets is Dr. Lyudmila Likova. Giant blast doors designed to protect the Kremlin's most precious records from nuclear attack swing open.
We're down here, it's 30 feet, walls are 2 feet thick, and this is Lenin's archive.
If any place may hold the answers to Falsetti's questions, this would be it.
So these are Lenin's documents, his originals?
Телеграмма из Копенгагена Ленину.
This one's from Copenhagen, correct?
Yeah.
Okay. Rumor here going that the Tsar has been murdered. Kindly wire facts. What's this?
The enquiry was one of many sent to Lenin in the weeks and days before the killing.
Rumor not true. Tsar safe. All rumors are only lie of capitalist press. And it's signed Lenin. So this is what we've been looking for. This is the point where the mystery and the confusion really began.
In fact, when Lenin replied, the family were still asleep with just hours to live. But by daybreak on the 17th of July, the deed was done. But exactly what occurred in the cellar is open to question. Only the executioners really knew, and their statements are on file in another basement. Regarded as the most accurate account, the report filed by Yakov Yurovsky, the head executioner, makes chilling reading. For better or worse, he was a man who did things by the book.
Yurovsky said this about the execution of the emperor's family. They stood along the wall, and here he said the following words to them. The reign of the Romanovs has reached its end. Despite the fact that relatives both outside and inside the country are trying to liberate them, the Ural Soviet of the Workers' Deputies has decreed they must be shot.
When the executioners opened fire, there were a number of problems. Amongst them, they were in a basement room with stone walls, which sent the bullets sort of ricocheting around the room.
The firing, Yurovsky says, becomes ever so confused. And when this confused fire ended, the shooters saw the daughters were still alive. They shot the girls, but nothing happened. They weren't able to kill them.
Incredibly, eyewitness accounts agree that the duchesses seemed to be protected by jewel-filled corsets that acted as bulletproof vests. Likova then plays Falsetti recordings made in the 1960s by surviving members of the firing squad.
It appeared they'd sewn diamonds into their bras, a variety of necklaces, pearls, etc., etc. Bullets were bouncing off. There was somebody, well, so to say, as if not finally killed. This woman, Anastasia.
A botched execution. Anastasia may have survived the initial gunfire. Could she really have cheated death with a diamond corset? And if that was true, then what else might be possible?
All the accounts go on to say that everyone was finally killed with a gunshot wound to the head. But what if that's a lie? What if there were co-conspirators?
Co-conspirators that helped her escape. Myth and fact are blurring again. Falsetti decides to stage an experiment to put the first part of the legend to the test.
Could jewels stop a bullet?
Diamonds are the hardest substance known to man, but clearly they can't be used in this experiment. Experts have supplied zirconias, which score 8 out of 10 on the gem hardness scale. Rose quartz and carnelian, still incredibly hard at 7. Bullets will smash into them at 1,000 feet per second. Will they be deflected? Colonel Vladimir Soloviev of the Interior Ministry is the leader of the Romanov investigation. But he still needed special permission to obtain the actual guns used by Yurovsky and his firing squad.
The curators from the museum have given me on loan the actual pistols used to kill the Tsar's family, to study them and to conduct our experiment for this investigation. Tsar Nicholas II was killed with this pistol. This second pistol was also in the basement of the Impatiev house, and it may have been used to kill other members of the Tsar's family. This pistol was also used in all the events in the Impatiev house.
It's a grotesque feeling to be in the presence, to hold the weapons that killed this family.
We're a bit scared to conduct this experiment, but we'll do it anyway.
The reconstructed jewel bodices are placed on the mannequin. All but the triggermen are asked to leave the room.
My palms are sweating, my heart is racing. We are going to put this legend to the test, and I have no idea what's going to happen.
Could a diamond corset have shielded Anastasia from a hail of bullets?
We had different powered weapons. They were fired sequentially, and what we have on the first two is clearly some fragmentation. These projectiles did not pass through on these first two. There's an impact site here from the second, but none of these were what we would consider penetrating gunshot wounds. This acts like a bulletproof vest. Maybe the legend is true.
Perhaps the bones found in the forest aren't from people killed in the basement that night after all. A gunshot aimed at the heart, deflected by jewels sewn beneath the clothes. The accounts that bullets ricocheted, that Maria or Anastasia and Alexei perhaps survived the initial gunfire, are becoming plausible. Accounts that for nearly a century have fueled claims by some of being the royal heirs. The most famous, the case of Anna Anderson. Anna Anderson went to her grave claiming to be the last Grand Duchess Anastasia. She managed to convince many people, including the family of Peter Serendenaki, whose ancestors were part of the Tsar's inner circle.
My mother-in-law, to her dying days, to her last day, believed that Anna Anderson was Anastasia. For instance, she had a triangular injury on her foot, which was probably a bayonet stab. She also had the same stub toe problem as Anastasia. She had the same ear as Anastasia. There were a lot of similarities between the two.
Despite her persuasive tale, after her death, DNA testing revealed the truth of her identity. She was not royal, but a former factory worker from Poland. But determining if the newly found bones are really members of the Romanov family or simply another case of mistaken identity will take time. The DNA is so degraded that it must be run through an amplifier to see what, if any, fragments of genetic information remain. At his lab outside of Washington, D.C., Coble and his team are using a process called PCR, polymerase chain reaction. By exposing the faint traces of DNA that remain to a bacterial enzyme, a single piece of DNA can be multiplied, generating millions of copies. But even after amplification, there are no guarantees that any readable DNA will emerge to make identification possible. For now, the identity of the two individuals in the grave remains unknown. But while Coble and the genetic team search for viable DNA, in Russia, Falsetti's search for clues comes to an end. As he departs for home, he leaves with more questions than answers. In the 1991 grave, nearly intact full skeletons were found. But in the 2007 grave, only fragments. Why are there so few bones? All told, they make up less than 10% of a full skeleton. From experience, he knows that the remains are likely guarding other clues beyond DNA. The fact that the newly discovered bones are in such degraded condition may actually be a clue as to who they are. He must take another look at the information he's collected. This is Falsetti's lab at the University of Florida. Here, he'll draw on a lifetime of working with the departed to bring a voice to the mystery bones. Comparing his notes, looking for patterns, he'll comb through the accounts of the executioners and see if the history and bones tell a common story. This won't be an easy journey. Some of the Bolsheviks' greatest savagery began when the shooting finished.
I'm a scientist, I'm also a father. And this is it's a terrible thing to have happened to very young people.
As soon as the killing was done, Yakov Yurovsky, leader of the firing squad, writes that he feared that loyalist troops might arrive at any moment and catch him red-handed. But as the bodies were being loaded into a truck for disposal, the plan starts to unravel.
As they were lifting up one of the bodies, she sat up and screamed. It was either Marie or Anastasia. We know that 2 of the Grand Duchesses left that room alive. Ermakov grabbed a nearby rifle and ended up smashing them repeatedly in the face until they stopped screaming.
The bodies were then transported a dozen miles outside Yekaterinburg to the Koptyaki forest, to an area of abandoned mine works.
So here's what we know. The bodies were taken into the forest. They were thrown down a mine shaft. Grenades were thrown after them in an attempt to collapse the walls.
The bodies were only partially hidden, but with dawn approaching, Yurovsky returned to Yekaterinburg to report to his superiors. Misfortune strikes again. Yurovsky's men get drunk and brag to locals, telling them how they have killed the royals and the location of the bodies. For Yurovsky, secrecy is everything, but a whole day and night passes before he can move the corpses again.
The next day, the bodies were retrieved, and Yurovsky has his men looking for a new location.
Back in the forest, after more summer rain, the ground is like glue. The truck gets stuck. The bodies are offloaded. Yurovsky is exhausted and his men mutinous. He decides to try burning 2 of the bodies. To make the process easier, the men are ordered to dismember the corpses.
So this is where the science and history start to meet up. One of the bones we have has a cut mark in it. It's a slash right through the shaft.
The physical damage to fragment number 147 supports the story of dismemberment. But yet another indignity awaited the bodies before they were burnt, with results not visible on the bones. Yurovsky claims to have had his men pour acid over the corpses to disfigure them beyond recognition. Chemical composition tests on the bones, conducted in Russia, reveal faint traces of sulfuric acid on the remains, another match between forensic evidence and the archival account. According to Yurovsky, he and his men now begin to burn what is left of the 2 bodies. Falsetti puts the Bolshevik plan to the test. Instead of human flesh, he uses a close biological analog: pig flesh. Its composition and structure are so similar to human anatomy that pigs are often used in forensic comparisons.
We know that they had between an hour and a half and 3 hours to completely consume 2 human bodies.
3 hours later, the pig carcass is charred but still intact.
What we've demonstrated here is it's not possible to consume a body in a fire, certainly not one for 3 hours, relatively low temperatures.
Yurovsky's plan to incinerate the corpses was more than a failure. It was a fiasco. Dawn was breaking, and there were still 9 bodies in the truck. A drastic change in tactics was in order. He tells of how his men then dug a second pit further to the west. They threw the remaining 9 bodies into this hole, poured acid on them, and then covered the pit with planks and soil before leaving.
What we know about history is being reflected by the evidence.
But mere circumstantial evidence will not be enough to put the legend of Anastasia's escape to rest. To prove that the remains are not part of some elaborate hoax, history must be corroborated by the irrefutable: DNA. Do these new bodies belong to the royal bloodline? By most accounts, the Tsar and his royal family were a close, tight-knit group, frequently seen together. Filmed on a cruise when the children were still very young. Playing tennis while on holiday a few years later. Parading together, as in this 1913 celebration of 300 years of Romanov rule, where we can see the 9-year-old Crown Prince Alexis and the 4 daughters on the cusp of womanhood. But were the Romanovs as inseparable in death as they were in life? The DNA evidence gathered from the second grave will tell the story. 5 months after first selecting the bone samples for analysis, Mike Coble is now ready to share his findings with Anthony Falsetti.
Let's see what you've got.
The first thing that we should look at is here. This is the marker that determines sex. And sample 146, there's an XY, which means this is a male sample.
Right.
And then 147 has one X peak, and this is what we see with females.
So far, the DNA only demonstrates that there were 2 bodies in the grave. 1 male, 1 female. Mike Coble's next step was to compare the male sample with DNA from Tsar Nicholas and his wife, Alexandra.
So what we have here on top, this is a profile from the Tsar, and then this on the bottom is a profile from the Tsarina. And here is the male sample from the second grave. We expect that this particular profile is going to be a combination of the Tsar and the Tsarina, if this is truly Alexis. This male got this 25 repeat peak from the Tsar, and this 23 peak was passed to him from the Tsarina. And here is
17 out of 17 possible matches.
The evidence is overwhelming.
Yeah, absolutely. That's their son.
Exactly.
And they had one son, and that's Alexis.
Exactly.
Right.
Finally, forensic evidence that 13-year-old Crown Prince Alexis was executed, along with the rest of his family, though not buried with them. And what about the female found in the second grave?
This is some of the...
Coble compared Alexis' DNA with hers.
What's interesting, though, is that, notice, they both share 23. They both share this marker, which is a 33.2 repeat.
Once again, marker after genetic marker is shared.
Has 17 repeats, 23 repeats.
Leading to another overwhelming statistical probability.
It's over 1 million times more likely that these remains are siblings than if they were completely unrelated.
Okay.
Very strong evidence here that we have a brother and a sister. Yeah.
That sister was either Maria or Anastasia. But beyond that, the DNA is silent.
Of course, there is a limitation here. The DNA can't tell us exactly which child is Anastasia and which child is Maria.
The bottom line is it really doesn't matter anymore because they're all present and accounted for.
Yeah.
It's taken nearly a century, but at last, the final chapter in the story of the Romanov dynasty can be written. Anastasia, the youngest Romanov daughter, did not escape the firing squad. Like her mother, her father, her baby brother, her 3 older sisters, Anastasia was shot to death in July of 1918, 1 month after her 17th birthday. She was buried along with the others among the towering birch trees. It was surely not the end any of them expected or deserved. But the DNA evidence makes it clear that's what really happened on the night when Russia's longest-lived dynasty came to its abrupt and bloody end.